and a huge warm welcome to my guest today, Cheryl Warren, who I'm really excited to chat to about neuro-affirming practice and how this works in reality. But first, let me tell you a little bit about our guest. Cheryl is an award-winning trainer and consultant working across the UK and is clear on her mission to provide early years spaces that enable our neurodivergent children to thrive, not just survive. Cheryl's passion and specialism for understanding and acceptance for neurodiversity within early years is impactful and comes from the heart as a professional and also as a parent of two neurodivergent children herself. She is an advocate for true neurodiversity affirming practice, enabling all children to be heard, to be given the tools and connections to thrive, and to be celebrated and accepted for their uniqueness. Her work has now taken her international, with speaking and training invitations across Europe, and she has had her first book published on this important subject. This is going to be a really exciting conversation. So without further ado, I am really pleased to welcome Cheryl to the Recap podcast today. How are you?
I'm all right, thank you. Thank you very much for that introduction. It's taken a while for us to get here with various things in the diary, but I'm glad we have. So thank you for having me.
I think this is just life. We're both parents, we're both running our own businesses, you know, we both have to sleep. So to the things that, well, most of the time.
What's that?
I know. I can completely identify with that. But no, I'm really, really pleased that we managed to get this in the diary and make it happen. So thank you so much for giving us your time today. So I just want to start off with your parenting journey. What was your journey into parenting like for you?
We can go down the gory detail route.
That's fun.
Not so much. So in essence, I mean, my eldest is knocking on the door of 18. So, you know, we're talking a long while ago now. But yeah, it was tricky to start. Like I said, I'm not going to go into details, but it was a traumatic birth. And both of us are rather lucky to be here. And I think with hindsight and that whole kind of retrospective look on life, I think I was definitely in the kind of midst of postnatal depression and had a really tough time in those initial stages of my parenting journey. There was some real separation anxiety, and that was actually from me to him rather than the other way around. At the beginning, I really, really struggled with lots and lots of different things. But in terms of my discovery, if you like, and my understanding of the different path that he was following, was when he was around 2.5 years old. He was very articulate at that age, and you know, he could have a very, you know, in-depth conversation with an adult as a 2.5-year-old. But when you put him in a room of children his age, he struggled. Yeah. And the things that you do with your 2.5-year-old, you know, the events you go to, family events and parties, soft play, that was a big thing 18 years ago. Yeah. You know, those kind of soft play spaces and everything else. It was a quick realization that he was really struggling in some of those spaces, and what others were identifying as, is it possible that, you know, the terrible twos, is he this, is he this, is this? And I just thought, you know what, there's I mean, I don't call it terrible twos, like terrific twos instead. But there was something there that I was identifying, and for me, the first thing that really kind of tipped my thought process into what things could be in terms of these developmental differences that I was seeing was that we went to a theme park, and I had, like, they called it a nursery pass. So when he used to go to a school-based nursery, so he was attending his, you know, every morning and in the school nursery. And every other week on a Wednesday afternoon, because I was working freelance at the time, and sometimes he'd go to a childminder and sometimes he'd be with my mum. But on a Wednesday, it was our time. And I collected him from nursery, and we used to go to our local theme park because they had, you know, the little rides, and it was a zoo and all of those other things. And we used to go every Wednesday or every other Wednesday with our packed lunch. And we'd go into the car park and we would follow the same route around the park. It was
Right.
There was a definite routine that was forming of which rides we were going to go on and when we were going to go on them and which one was next and which route we were going to walk around the path and which animals we were going to see first. And then we were invited to meet some friends in the summer holidays at the theme park. And I was like, brilliant, we've got our pass, so it's not going to cost me any more to get in. And yeah, he loves going there, so that'll be fantastic. Close friends, and yeah, absolutely fine. And as we got to the car park, there was an attendant there who said, as we got to the front of the queue, car park full, use the overflow car park. I was like, oh, okay, yeah, that's fine, not a problem. I know where that is. So instead of turning right into the car park, I turned left to go back onto the road to join the overflow car park. I had my son in the back of the car, kicking and pushing the seat in front, trying everything he could to get out of his car seat, and screaming and shouting that we weren't going. He called it the Bubble Park, because there was a ride called the Bubble Works, and he called it the Bubble. We're not going to the Bubble Park. We're supposed to be going to the Bubble Park. That way's to the Bubble. And it was this full-on meltdown. And it took me a long time to support him with his dysregulation and to bring him back to that state of balance. And that was my first indicator that, hang on, we've gone off kilter, we've gone off plan. He's really struggling with this. And then various other things kind of come into play. And it was then nursery started to say, he seems to like nursery, but he doesn't have any friends. He doesn't play with anybody else. And I remember once he turned around to me when I asked him if he had any friends and what he was doing with his friends. And he said, Mummy, I don't. They play weird. And that was what he said. They're then 3.5. And there were various other things that, you know, we were trying to support him to experience. We tried rugby with him. His dad played rugby, and we thought, okay, that might be something that he would want to do. Knowing now, no way was that something he would want to do. And, you know, it's quite clear that once we got him his kit and he was out on the field and it was raining a little bit, and the rain touching his skin impacted his skin, and I'm like, we're adding things up here. But so I then started the conversation with my GP. Back then we had a really close family GP. She knew me, she knew the family, known her since I was a child. And she listened, which was amazing. She validated what I was saying. And we started that process of diagnosis, which didn't come through until he was 6. So it was we didn't put the thing in at the referral in at 3.5. It was a little bit later than that. But he got the diagnosis when he was 6. So, like I say, he's now nearly 18, but he was diagnosed at 6 as autistic and with sensory processing differences as well. So, you know, we talk about the X Factor journey, don't we? It's been a journey of discovery and, you know, ups and downs and moments of crying and despair, plus a hell of a lot of moments that have just had me in fits of laughter. And, you know, and I've obviously then been on my very own journey of discovery of what's going on for him. And you become a parent that has to learn pretty quick that your journey for parenting is going to be very, very different. And you've got to learn new things quickly, and you've got to face challenges that you didn't think you were going to have to face. And you are up against lots of judgment and criticism and blame, and all sorts of things. So as well as the roller coaster of trying to support your child in those real big moments of overwhelm, and then you know, trying to support them with routine and transitions and all of those things, you're also on your own journey where you are having to develop an inner strength to fight back, to question the sector, question the system, and ultimately then, as many parents describe, fight the system. So that was my eldest, and then it was during COVID that my husband and I identified that my youngest was really struggling with retaining information and retention of letters, numbers, sounds, because, you know, it was in that moment, wasn't it, that we were all homeschooling and you're kind of, you know, you're in it with your children. And he just wasn't, and we weren't doing the worksheets. You know, my husband is, he works in early years as well. And he's been working early years for a long time. So in essence, my youngest had 70 years of early years experience supporting him during COVID. So we weren't doing worksheets. We weren't doing online schooling. We were making forts in the garden. We were going on sound walks and environment walks outside, number hunts, and we were shooting balloons with drawing pins at the end of Nerf gun bullets with phonics on. You know, we were doing the whole
Love
thing.
that.
It was brilliant. But he just wasn't retaining this information, and you could see the frustration and the frustration from him that, you know, we were trying to kind of support him with all, but he wasn't able to kind of, like I say, retain it. So when we went back to school, when things opened up again, it was a conversation with his teacher, who said, "Oh, let's see, now he's back at school. Let's see if." Okay. So we gave it a while. And then we were told that because the local authority we're in, he wasn't going to get an assessment until he was in year 3. Well, this was the tail end of year 1 going into year 2. And I thought, I'm not waiting anymore. If it is what we think it might be, my boy needs some support now, not wait another. And it was, you're not going to get an assessment until then. So by the time that all goes through, it could be kind of tail end of year 3. So we went for a private assessment, and he was diagnosed dyslexic. So in terms of neurotypes, I have boys with very different. So my eldest has done okay at school with the support that we fought to get him in school. And he's now flourishing. You know, we've got university visits this weekend. He wants to do history. He smashed his GCSEs, which we didn't think he would do. He's done really, really well. But all through primary school, it wasn't until he took his options at secondary school that he started to build friendships with people. My youngest is the center of every friendship group. He gets invited to all the parties. He's in there amongst everybody. You know, you walk him into school and everyone's like, "Oh, hi Stan, hi, how you doing?" You know, everyone gathers around him. But he hates school. So I've got 2 children, very, very different. One that does okay with the routine and the structure of school and likes that and feels safe with that. But only now at the age he has that friendship group, but certainly not before. And then I've got the other one who hates school with a passion. You know, if he never had to go back again, he wouldn't. Doesn't understand it. We're going through SATs at the moment. That's hilarious. Not. That whole process is ridiculous. But loves the social side of it and you know, gathers around friends. So I've got very different boys with very different needs, which, going back to what we said right at the beginning, is why I don't sleep, because there's lots going on.
Still now, when one's like 18, the lack of sleep.
Well, yes, because he's now got friends, so they're now out and about, and they're now doing, and I'm just like,
Do you know what? This is something that I said quite recently as well. So my daughter is 18, but she didn't get her autism and ADHD and sensory processing diagnosis until she was 16. So we kind of went through many years of not really understanding why she was struggling. and we were kind of out the other side of the education system before we realised. I actually deregistered her at 14, and she was home educated for the final years of her schooling because she was struggling, not academically, but with the environment. You know, her sensory processing was in overdrive. Her emotional regulation is still now at 18 something that she really struggles with. But going back to what you were saying, it's a whole different world parenting an adult. You know, when they turn 18 and, you know, she's out driving, she could like go see friends. And, you know, a few weeks back, she didn't get in until 3 a.m. And I was like, this is a whole different world of parenting. This isn't, you know, and this is the thing, isn't it? We hear so much online with people's stories and lived experiences about parenting through the toddler years and parenting through those early years and in primary school and in secondary school. I think once you get to kind of college age, university age and young adult, it kind of filters out a little bit. But actually, we still need that help. We still need that kind of feeling of community and hearing that other people are going through the same thing, because it's a different stress, isn't it, when they become young adults?
Absolutely. And even down to, you know, trying to and I think people forget that they, like you said, they still have their struggles and they still face so many challenges. You know, he's been trying to apply for jobs, which is a minefield in itself. He got himself a little holiday place scheme job at one of the nurseries that I've been working with. So they know him, they know the story, and everything else is great. So I knew once he was in there, it would be fine. But the whole process for recruitment and the forms he had to fill out and where he had to go and what he had to do, and, oh, you didn't quite do that right. He was ready to kind of, I can't do this, because the cognitive overload and the kind of barrage of information that was needed was a real struggle for him. So I had to step in as the parent again, because he still struggles to regulate. And he went into a meltdown. And you know, people, I've had it said to me, which is ridiculous, so many times before, is he now cured of his autism because he doesn't have the meltdowns he used to when he was little? He doesn't. Well, of course he doesn't. You know, he's not 3 anymore. That's why he's not. But when he has them, you know, he's 6'1". When he has them, they come big, and it's harder to support him, to bring him back to that sense of balance. And even, you know, a little while ago, again, with the job that I was referring to, one of the emails came through whilst he was out with his friends. The backwards and forwards messages, he was in a panic, the anxiety set in, but he's trying to mask it to his friends because he doesn't want to kind of have the big meltdowns that he has at home. Yeah. So it was a phone call and I'm just walking away from my friends, Mom, wait a minute, he becomes my toddler again. Yeah. Because there's a thing in the, you know, a situation in the big world that he's really struggling with. And it is different, you know, in terms of his sensory processing, in terms of his interoception. He still does not have the bodily signals that tell him he's thirsty. Yeah. So I still have to remind him to, you know, you haven't had a drink for a while, dude. You can have, or he gets ill or something happens. And I'm like, yeah. So the whole thought of him going off to university, and everyone's like, yeah, we'll just drink the beer. And I'm like, but no, that's not helping. That's really not helping me. So it does. And like you, absolutely what you said, there's loads around in how we can support our parents of our children in you know, nursery and nursery age, school age. But yeah, parenting a neurodivergent adult is a new space I'm navigating. Yeah. So it doesn't, my mum still says she worries about me at 47. So I know from some point it doesn't ever go. Exactly. But I think it's just a completely different ball game when you're looking at raising, you know, being with this neurodivergent adult that wants to do the things that now his peers are doing, but you know that there are still so many elements that he struggles with. And also knowing the difference between, oh, I can help you with that. Because I still think I have that separation anxiety with him. Oh, do you want me to help? Do you want me to do it for you? Do you want me to, you know, all of that stuff. Whereas also trying to let him navigate it himself. So it's a tricky one.
Yeah, I see. It's so true. And I think when you were saying there about having to deal with things over the phone and the additional kind of challenge while they're out and about and away from you, and we had a similar thing. I was in Brighton, and there was something that had upset her, and she was at home, so we were hours apart, and she was on the phone to me having a meltdown about this, and I couldn't be there next to her. I couldn't co-regulate. I had to do everything over the phone, which was so difficult. And I ended up saying to her, like, she got into my bed, I said, get the dog, get into my bed and try and get some sleep. And so I kind of got off the phone to her. I'm hours away. I think it was something like 1 a.m. I'm hours away. I got off the phone to her, and I didn't sleep a wink, because the last thing that I'd spoken to was she was having this meltdown. She was like, I'm just going to go. And that was the last I'd heard. So I didn't sleep a wink all night. Got up the next morning, drove home. I spoke to her when I got home, and she was like, oh yeah, I fell straight to sleep after that. I'm glad you got some sleep, because I sure
That was fine, Mum. I was fine.
I think she'd exhausted herself to the point where she just crashed straight after the phone call. She'd spoken to me, so she'd got that kind of reassurance. And do you know what? I was the same as a child. I had separation anxiety with my mum terribly as a child. And speaking on the phone to her was really comforting, because I could hear her voice. So even though if she wasn't with me, I could hear her voice, and that was really comforting. So I think it was an element of that, and she was so overwhelmed and absolutely exhausted from this meltdown that she just kind of crashed. But and another thing to add into the mix as well, I think it's really hard when you're neurodivergent yourself as a parent. So I got my autism diagnosis last year. So when she's dysregulated and I'm dysregulated, that's a really hard space to be in, because as a parent, I am very much, it is your responsibility. You need to look after your child. You need to make sure that she's okay, and her kind of needs come first and all of this. Yeah. But I have very particular needs myself, and that's really hard. And you feel selfish, because you think, well, no, my role is as a parent. I need to make sure she's okay first. So having that kind of co-dysregulation as well is a really hard space to be in. So when you go into the adult years, and you know, we had a conversation the other week, and she was like, I'm an adult now, and I said to her, yes, but that doesn't stop you being my child. It's just so hard when they're adults now.
No, it's such a tricky season to navigate. And you know, I'm literally, I mean, well, now we're talking in October, and I think you said this might go out January, he would have hit 18. So, you know, and I kind of said, because I'd worked in early years for so long, when both my children got to the age of 5, I was like, I don't know what to do with them now. I've only ever had my experiences early years. What do I do? And now he's an adult. It's like, I have not got a clue. And you know, the things that you think they might do okay with, they don't, and the things that you think that they will struggle with, they kind of sail through, and you're like, yeah. The roller coaster continues.
Oh, tell me about it. And I think as well, as much as, and we'll come on to talk about this more, I'm sure, but as much as schools still have a long way to go, in kind of education, there is acknowledgement of neurodiversity. There is support available if you are able to access it and things like that. When you look at things like my daughter did an apprenticeship. So when you look at things like going through an apprenticeship, going to university, going into the workplace, the feel around supporting neurodivergent individuals is different, and not everyone is kind of on board with that. And especially, and we'll go on to talk about neuroaffirming practice as well, but I remember having to step in her apprenticeship, because they just didn't support the fact that she was neurodivergent, and they didn't understand how to support that. And she would come home to me and tell me all of these different things, and I was like, right, I need to step in, because you need better support. And we were lucky at that point that she did have a formal diagnosis, so we were able to access things. I dread to think how much of a struggle it would be for individuals who don't have that diagnosis. And again, when she went into the workplace, and having an employer who understands how to approach things and deal with certain situations and things like that, it's a real struggle. So you're right, it's a completely different phase of parenting, with different challenges and different things that you have to kind of learn on the hop, really.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But also for for him at the minute, it's, he's filling out application forms for jobs and things, and it comes to the question, do you have a disability? And he's like, what do I put, Mum?
Yeah.
What do I put? And I said, I don't have a disability. Okay, but they may need to make some accommodations and adaptations to support you.
Yeah.
And, in terms of the medical model, you do have a disability. You do have a diagnosed disability. But he said, yeah, but I don't want to say I've got a disability, because then what if they don't take me on? What if that, and it's that conversation now that we're trying to support him to have. Whilst we are a neurodivergent affirming household, and we talk openly about it, we kind of laugh about stuff. The amount of, he was doing art GCSE, and he came home with his stuff, and I'm like, oh my God, you're such an artist. He went, no, Mummy, I'm not an artist. I'm autistic. I'm like, okay. Now that's funny. So, he's very aware that he's different, he's autistic, but now entering a field where he thinks he's going to be judged. He's in the same school that he's been in since he was 11 years old, doing his A-levels. He feels safe, he can be himself. He's now entering this new phase, and even down to universities and stuff. He's doing his own UCAS form at school. I don't know what he's putting down on there. I don't know. So then, am I going to have to come and like you did with your daughter's apprenticeship? Am I going to have to step in and kind of go, look, dude, you're going to need to have this conversation, because you may well need some support along the way. So yeah. Any top tips from any listeners that they want to pop in that can help us out, then please, yes. I'll take it all.
Signed 2 sleep-deprived, stressed mothers.
Yes.
So I want to talk a little bit about this kind of neuro-affirming practice, this kind of phrase. I think many people will not have heard this phrase before, or not really understand what it means. So what does kind of neuro-affirming practice mean?
Yeah, so in essence, it forms, it kind of is the foundation for what I do, the talks I do, the support I do in settings. Being neurodiversity affirming is what to affirm is to acknowledge, to celebrate, to validate, to kind of be the cheerleader of our children and adults who are different. And it's very much looking at our children through this lens of difference, because our children are different, but not placing an equal sign next to the word difference that says deficit. Our children there is nothing wrong with our children. Our children are not a problem. Our children do not need to be fixed or cured of their difference. And we need to recognize that difference is okay. We, in the world that we live, in the way that the world is moving, we need different brains. We need my dyslexic son with his brain that problem solves, with his brain that looks outside of the box, that looks at the bigger picture, that questions things. We need my eldest with his autistic brain, with his attention to detail in his special interests, to dive deep into certain, factors and challenges. We need those brains. But in education, a different brain is considered sometimes a problem, because they don't fit the mold. They don't comply always. They don't follow the rules. They're not getting the scores that they should be getting in their SATs results. Well, they don't, because SATs are for standardized brains, and my children do not have standardized brains. Seeing, if we're talking about children within their early years, and we talk lots about concerns and developmental delay, and we shouldn't be concerned. We should be affirming their difference. And if we look at the early years foundation stage, and we look at what we're assessing our children against, and even our national curriculum, we're assessing our children against what is considered achievable and what we should strive for the average neurotypical brain.
Yeah.
You know, what we see in Development Matters, what we see in Birth to Five, what we see in our national curriculum and our SATs tests. Only I'm SATs because that's the life we're in at the minute. They are set for your average neurotypical brain.
No.
Well, my children aren't neurotypical; they're neurodivergent. The whole notion of neurodivergent is that they're following a divergent path, a different pathway. But we seem to have a problem with children that aren't compliant robots. So neurodiversity affirming is that true belief and understanding of our children's difference, viewing our children through this equity lens. So we are meeting, it's not always about, because I know in early years, especially, and even early primary, our children don't always have a diagnosis because they're not meeting a certain threshold, or waiting lists are too long, or the process is taken too long and the assessment isn't in, or whatever it might be. So we don't always see have our children with a diagnosis. It's not even about a diagnosis. Being neurodiversity affirming is that belief and understanding of that child right in front of you and what they are currently struggling with at 20 to 11 on a Wednesday morning.
Yeah.
What does that need from you right now? And it's affirming our children's identity. We are, as a nation, we are signed up to the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. Every child has the right to an education. Every child has the right to play. Every child has the right to an identity. It's not every child has the right to play as long as it's neurotypical, or every child has the right to an education as long as they follow this way, or every child has the right to an identity as long as it doesn't differ a little bit. Their neurotype is part of their identity. It's who they are. My son isn't, he's not William with autism. He doesn't carry it around in a little bag that he can put down as and when he wants to. He is autistic. My youngest is dyslexic. It's part of who he is. So it's this acceptance. It's seeing our children's strengths and focusing on what our children can do. And quite often I'll go into a setting, and I'm often kind of asked to come in because the team are really struggling with the child's behaviour and they're not sure how to support them. And like you said in the intro, this is about how we can support our children to thrive, not just survive. So the settings are saying, at the moment, we just feel like they're surviving, but we want them to thrive. How can we do that? And we've got this behaviour in front of us. What's going on? And I'll turn up and I'll ask for information on this particular child. Tell me about them. And I'll get a long list of, they can't do this, they refuse to do that, they won't follow the instructions for this. And then I'll go and observe the child, and I pull out all the strengths. The fact that the child is self-regulating, the fact that the child is trying to, in their way, connect with their peers. The child does have a level of language. We just need to affirm and support their communication preference. They have a different play type. Well, they still play. They're still showing attention. They're still focusing. They're just not doing it in the way that you want them to. So it's strength-based. It's viewing our children through an equity lens. It's celebrating and validating who our children are right from the beginning. Because if our children are constantly getting messages that the way they play is a problem, the way that they communicate is wrong, the way they're not sitting on the carpet for carpet time is an issue. Well, we're telling our children that the way they're living their lives, who they are, their neurotype is a problem. And what happens very quickly is that our children begin to mask who they are because they keep getting in trouble, or they keep being pulled up, or the parents are constantly being spoken to. And that has massive implications, you'll know, for children's long-term mental health and well-being. So we want to provide a space where our children can be their true, authentic self.
Right.
And if we understand what that child needs, we can provide an environment that meets those needs. You will then see fewer meltdowns. You will develop connection and trust and that sense of belonging, where your children will thrive. So it's understanding neurodivergence. It's understanding the triggers that impact our children and what we can do to eliminate or mitigate the impact of those triggers, and responding to our children with that true connection and humility and just kindness, rather than them being a problem.
Absolutely. Do you think that there's enough support and education for our early years workforce to be able to take this on board and do you think that's where some of the problem lies, is that they don't understand neurodiversity well enough to be able to be neuroaffirming?
Well, I mean, from my point of view, in terms of how crazy my diary is, it kind of indicates that there is a need out there. And, you know, when I'm speaking at events and keynotes or workshops or seminars or whatever it is, the amount of people that come over to me and go, I didn't know this stuff. I'm now seeing, you know, and I've had people come over to me just upset because they feel that they have done wrong by children because they didn't know it. And I'm very much, you know, I'm not one of those people that kind of goes, no, you should be doing this. We don't know what we don't know.
Yes.
But once we do know, we need to do something about it. So for me, I mean, there's never, I mean, I've been doing this 30 years. I've had my company now for 4. I'm still learning every single day. We never stop. We do seem to have shifted, you know, right back when I started and I spoke to people about the training that they've done. They kind of, oh yeah, I've done autism awareness training. That was the kind of thing. And I've done an online 20-minute autism awareness course. So yeah, I know. It's not enough that we're just aware. And from my perspective, the notion of neurodiversity affirming practice is something that we don't touch in any level 3 childcare qualification, in teacher training. There isn't enough training in the teacher training curriculum around SEN, from my opinion anyway. From what teachers tell me, they've had half an hour or one afternoon on SEN in their PGCE year. It's just not enough. So no, I don't think there is enough knowledge out there. The passion and the desire to do the right thing for our neurodivergent children 100% is there. But people want the toolbox of strategies and the understanding. And for me, a little bit of an online training with a company that maybe people haven't had, you know, it's not a real person, it's not lived experience, it's not enough to kind of just signpost somebody to a quick online training course that does it in half an hour. They can go and, you know, cook their spaghetti bolognese while they tick something to say they've completed it. We do need some deeper level understanding of neurodiversity affirming practice, and not just for our children, but for the families. You know, for me as a parent, I needed, you know, I was lucky enough. I had amazing, you know, childcare for both my children, but that's not always the case. And we are blamed and judged and criticised because, again, there's not that understanding of maybe why we're parenting the way that we are. You know, and I'm doing a session in a couple of weeks on how we can support parents who are in denial, because that's a phrase I hear all the time. You know, I was very aware of my son's developmental differences when he was 2.5, but I couldn't say it out loud because it was really scary. So what I needed was a team of people around me who were neurodiversity affirming, to allow me permission to parent the way that I needed to for my child. To build connections with me so that I felt heard and understood, to better support my child. So there's a whole big piece of, and then we kind of flip also into, you know, you alluded to it earlier, our early years workforce. You know, neurodivergent children become neurodivergent adults, as we've said right at the beginning. And, you know, they are working with us. They are our colleagues in our nurseries and in our schools. So it's also about how we can provide the support for our neurodivergent staff so that they can shine and thrive as well. So for me, we need to look at the bigger picture. Yes, the children, but also the family as a unit, but also looking at your neurodivergent team and the strengths that they bring to your workplace, and making sure that they are in a workplace where they can be themselves and where they can thrive as well.
I completely agree. And I think as well, when we think about how children look to the staff around them, and, you know, they look to them as role models, they learn, we know children learn through observation, and their environments around them. So if for argument's sake there was a neurodivergent member of staff who was really embraced to be that person and to be who they are, imagine what that feels like for a child to observe that and to think, well, actually, yeah, maybe I can be me as well. And I think that's really important. And I think, as much as we kind of say how much the early years workforce struggle, you know, they're underfunded, underappreciated, there isn't enough training, there isn't enough support and things like that. I think one thing that early years does really well is that kind of multidisciplinary working, you know, between the workforce, the families, the children, all of the services that are involved. When that works well, it works really well. And I think they're an amazing workforce that do that. And before I went into research, I was part of that workforce, and I worked in nurseries and preschools and special needs schools and things like that, and saw it in action. And I think that's really special. So I completely agree with what you're saying. It is multifaceted. We don't just have to think about our children. It's everyone in our children's lives. How are we supporting everyone? And going back to what you said there about you know, doing the one-off training and 20 minutes online, and yes, I've done my autism training because I've ticked off that box. And again, as you said, we are always learning, and we're always learning new things. And, you know, this is why, with my researcher hat on, you know, it's why I love research, because we're always finding out new things. And that's what we do. We observe, we learn, we adapt, and we do it again. And it's a cycle, and that's what research is. And so a one-off training session doesn't mean that, oh yes, you can now fully understand and work with an autistic individual, because actually we still don't know everything and we're still learning. So it's really important to consistently engage in that. And I think that's where we maybe fall down a bit in terms of the support of the early years workforce is, you know, they may go and do their qualification, level 3, level 4, what have you, and then they're in the workforce. And then, you know, it's so important for that CPD element of that continual professional development, isn't it, as part of that?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It doesn't stop. And I think as well, sometimes a lot of the training becomes quite generic. And, you know, there's a great phrase that says, once you've met one autistic person, you've met one autistic person. So we need to understand, and that's why neurodiversity affirming practice is really key, because this is not about, like I said, this is not about a child with a diagnosis. This is about neurodivergence, and that covers lots and lots of different things. You know, I very rarely dive deep into what autism is, or what ADHD is, or what PDA is. This is looking at the kind of common themes that many of our neurodivergent children are kind of showing us in terms of their behaviors and what impacts them. And, you know, 95% of our neurodivergent children have sensory processing differences. That's huge. So we need to start there, because we're looking at all of those children. And it's getting to know the unique child in front of you, not the child with the label.
Yeah.
It's not about the label. It's not about the diagnosis. And I hear, again, going back to the phrase parents are in denial, we don't have to have permission or a signature from a parent to provide some adaptations and some accommodations that are going to support that child right in front of you right now. There are things we can do in the environment to strip it down, to take away the sensory overwhelm. There are things we can do for transitions. There are things that we can do within our routine. There are different ways that we can think about how we connect with our children through play, that don't need a diagnosis. So whilst you are supporting the parent and building that relationship with the parent, so that when they are ready to have that conversation with you, they know that you're the right person to have it with, you can still be supporting the child and offering a space where you can provide safety, where you can meet their needs, where you can understand their behavior. You can still do all of that whilst the parent is on the journey that they're on, until they are ready. And that parent might not be ready in that child's whole early years until they move on to school. That's okay. But there is still so much that we can do to support neurodiversity in our setting, that does come from that neurodiversity affirming approach. And it's not, if you create a great space for your neurodivergent children, you will create an amazing space for all of your children. This is not about what we can do for our children with SEN, and things have to be done separately. This is about how we can provide a space for all. That's what inclusion is, how we can provide a space for all. How can we make sure that our neurodivergent children, even if they don't want to come to the table, are invited to sit at the table? And that's where that neurodiversity affirming practice comes into play. It's not about a diagnosis or a label or, a referral. It's about viewing our children through a different lens.
Yeah, absolutely. Are there any misconceptions around neurodiversity that you've come across that you can kind of debunk for us?
We can't support a child with SEN because we don't have a sensory room. The child needs one-to-one, and parents are in denial. They're the kind of three top ones for me. You do not need to have a sensory room. And we also have to be aware that when our children are in meltdown or dysregulated, we need to understand that by sending them to a quiet space to calm down isn't always what they need. Their behavior sometimes is telling you that their sensory systems need activating, not calming. So if that child is spinning round around, if that child is, like we kind of like to describe as bouncing off the walls, they don't need to go and calm down. And that's having an awareness of your sensory systems. We don't just have 5 sensory systems, we have 8. We need to understand our vestibular system, interoception and proprioception, again, to get to know the child in front of us to be able to meet their needs. So I talk about creating a place of escape where children can reach to and decompress when things get too much. And that's not outside of the room in a separate space, because that needs a member of staff, and we know ratios and everything. That's really, really tricky. So we need to create a place of escape within our room that has that opportunity for that illusion of privacy, where children can go when they are overwhelmed. First, supporting the child through that co-regulation relationship. And then it's a place where children know that they can go to self-regulate. But also understanding that when the child, like I say, is spinning or bouncing about or chewing on everything or pushing all the other children or biting other children, They don't need to calm down. The sensory system need activating. So you need to give them something that they can spin safely with, that they can jump about on, that they can feel where their body is in space, because that's what their signals in their body are telling them that they need. So that's a myth, that every child, you need a sensory room and every child has to go and calm down. It's not the case. Parents are in denial. I think we've spoken about that. And then every child needs a one-to-one. Some children do. Yes. Okay. Some children might need a one-to-one if you're going on a trip. In terms, you've done your risk assessment, and actually from a safety perspective, yes, that child needs to be with a specific member of staff. But not every child, if you get, an application comes through and, from a parent and the child's autistic or, whatever. Oh, we can't have that child in because they need a one-to-one. I have worked with settings where they have employed a one-to-one for a child. I have worked with them on understanding the child, resetting the environment, looking at the amount of transitions that are happening during the day, looking at the behavior and the triggers and what's going on for that child, thinking about our response to that child. That child didn't need a one-to-one anymore. So it's looking at the needs of the child in front of you. And, if we're all neurodiversity affirming and we have that space that supports that, not every child needs a one-to-one. But also we need to understand that the child with a one-to-one, quite often that one-to-one member of staff can be a barrier for other children engaging with that child, because there's a constant adult there. So that can be a barrier to engagement with their peers. You can also, and I've seen it so many times, you've got the child here and then the adult here is behind them and they become a shadow. And the neurodivergent child, quite honestly, just gets a little bit chased off with this shadow constantly. And you can see that in their behavior. They're frustrated, they're angry, they just need some space. So actually it can be counterproductive. So we need to think about what that child needs, what's going on, getting to know all the things that we've been talking about, but also have an understanding that inclusion and supporting our neurodivergent children is not just the role of the one-to-one or the Senko.
Yeah.
With the new Ofsted, with the changes to the Ofsted inspections and the new toolkit, inclusion is now a standalone judgment. And one of the things in there is that everybody provides that inclusive space. Mm-hmm. So it for me, like safeguarding, it's everybody's responsibility.
Yeah.
Inclusion and supporting our children with SEN or any developmental difference is everybody's responsibility. And I think sometimes when you get a one-to-one, people kind of go, oh yeah, well, Johnny's their problem almost. Johnny's having a tough day. Well, that's not down to me. So yeah, we need a sensory room. Every child needs a one-to-one, and parents are in denial. They're the top three that I come across.
Yeah. No, I think it's so useful to hear you unpick those sorts of myths as well, because they're so common. And even, I don't work in early years anymore, but I am very familiar with those sorts of conversations that people are having. And especially what you're saying about, it's everybody's responsibility. Absolutely. You're a team, the workforce are a team, and it is everyone's responsibility, and it's the parents' responsibility, and it's the child's responsibility as well, as they grow through their educational years as well, and they get into a position where they can start to understand what their needs are and how their needs can be met as well. Some young people are able to communicate that and advocate for what they need as well. And if it's something that they can do, it is their responsibility as well to be able to do that. And it's so lovely to hear the breakdown of that, and to hear that your company are trying to bring that in and help support people to do that in a better way. If anyone listening, I know you said that your diary is incredibly crazy, but if anyone listening wants to work with you, how can they work with you?
Absolutely. And, for me, a lot of it is sometimes it's just conversations over social media. And, I get a direct message and I start to build that conversation with people. People ask me questions and it's lovely. I love connecting with people. So yeah, over on Instagram, I put up lots of different things over on Instagram, podcasts I'm up to, places where I'm speaking, but also I put up this, I know this is going to come out later, but it's bonfire night tonight. And I've put up some top tips on providing children with a sensory safe bonfire night. So I put up lots and lots of different things over on my social media. I have a podcast called Not Your Typical Podcast, which can be found over on Spotify or Apple, and there's lots of different conversations on there around neurodiversity affirming practice. And then through my website, there's some free downloads. People can book in a conversation with me. And what I've also launched as well, talking about online training, mine's not a quick 20-minute tick list. I've recently launched my online training, and it's 8 modules with a corresponding workbook. And each module, if you then go through the workbook as well, you're talking about an hour for each module that dives deep into neurodiversity affirming practice. I know everyone loves a certificate. You get a certificate at the end. And then if you complete all 8 modules, people can sign up to have a one-to-one Zoom with me for an hour to talk about any specific children or struggles or challenges that they are facing. So that's available on my website. I'm quite happy to chat with you, Lucy, and I'll throw in a discount code for people that want that. And if you want it as a group, if you are a nursery group and you all want to do it, there are discounts for group bookings as well. So yeah, I can come and do CPD training days, inset training days, or there are some nursery groups where I am their regular consultant. There are small nursery groups that haven't necessarily got an area Senko. Maybe they're not big enough. Maybe they don't want to employ an area Senko. So I am their consultant area Senko. So we really dive deep into embedding neurodiversity affirming practice. And that's what I love doing, because I'm back in the toddler room, I'm back in the preschool room, I'm getting to know the children, they get to know me. And I absolutely love it. So yeah, there's lots of different ways. Basically just come and connect and let's have a chat.
Brilliant. Thank you. I appreciate that. And that's great to hear that it's not just kind of nurseries and early years teams, but parents can reach out to you as well, and obviously follow on your socials for that information. And what I'll do is I'll put links underneath the episode so that people can find you really easily. We can't leave without mentioning your amazing book. Tell us about this book that you've written. What's it about? Who's it for? And where can we find it?
Yep, thank you very much. Yes, and my book, Neurodiversity in the Early Years, is all about these practical and proven strategies to support our children to thrive. So it's a book that you can read cover to cover if you want to. I can't do that. I'm not a reader. So I wanted to create a book that people can kind of pick up and put down as and when they need to. It starts off very much with my own journey. So it's a book that I know a lot of parents have resonated with. And then scattered through the book as well is lots of case studies and comments from parents and families of children with different neurotypes as well. It looks into all of the neurotypes that we might see within early years, and how we can support our children. So if you read the book and do the online training and have me, you are fully equipped to deliver neurodiversity affirming practice. But there's also lots of kind of moments of reflection. So I know there are lots of Senkos that have read it that are using it to pose questions to the team at team meetings to get the team thinking and reflecting on what they're doing. So it's for parents, it's for those who are starting out studying, that are doing their SEN units or, any kind of SEN support. I know the level 3 Senko qualification with a couple of training providers recommend it as one to read. So it's a reference book, but also has some kind of meaty case studies in there as well, and very much reflects and hears the neurodivergent voice. So my children's view on the world and their life and the way that they have, navigate things is in there. But then I also have had some fantastic contributions from other neurodivergent adults and how we can learn from them. Because for me, I'm questionable, but I'm a neurotypical adult raising neurodivergent children. And I wanted to very much make sure that the neurodivergent voice ran through the book. And then I also had lots of contributions from Senkos and managers, nursery owners, to share their stories of what they've done and the impact that they've had, so that readers can see that it is possible and maybe what they can do to support their children and their families. So yeah, lots in there. And you can get it over on Amazon. You can go to any bookshop and order it. I'm yet to see it on the shelf at Waterstone, so maybe we can try and encourage that. That would be great. Or directly through the publisher, through Routledge. You can get it through there as well.
Amazing. And I'll pop all the links underneath as well for that, so that people can find it. We've spoken about lots of different things throughout our conversation today. And whilst I encourage people to go back and re-listen to episodes to help process and digest all the different topics that we kind of cover, what would you like as kind of one thing that you think listeners should take away from today?
I think for me, it always comes down to different doesn't equal deficit. Mm-hmm. And viewing our children through that lens of different, but that different is okay. And actually, it's not about the child has to change. We have to meet those children right where they are, because where those children are is right where they are supposed to be. So join them where they are and see their differences as wonderful. And what can you learn from those children?
Absolutely. Cheryl, thank you so much for coming on and speaking with us today. Really appreciate your insights and cannot wait to follow and see what happens next.
Thank you very much for having me.